What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the Lights Out Fantasy Football Podcast. Process over results. Our normal Friday show got moved around a little bit. We had there's a lot of changes in plans due to Thanksgiving, family in town, people being surprised with tickets to hockey games, people having birthdays. There's just a lot going on with our trio here this week. But let's start with the birthday boy himself, Mr. Jake Ciely, our weekly guest on the show. Jake, what do you got planned? It's Jake's birthday weekend, by the way, guys. So make sure you send him a happy birthday on Twitter. Do something, because Jake, as we've established, Jake loves him some Jake. What are you doing this weekend, man?
Nothing. So it's dinner stuff. At this age, it doesn't really matter anymore. Nobody cares. I don't get a lot of presents or eventful things. It's just go out to eat, and then somebody pays for you, which is actually honestly the best part. You should get to go out to eat for free.
Nice. That is nice. That is very nice. Actually, we went out to dinner yesterday. Being the show was pushed back, I was able to go out to dinner with my grandpa and stuff like that, and he picked up the tab, so that was kind of nice. Joe, you got surprised with tickets to a hockey game, right?
Yeah, I thought it'd be all good. I figured Jake would be doing something a little more exciting than that, so there's no chance we were going to be recording yesterday, so I thought I'd jump at a chance to go to the Penguins Wild game, but turns out Jake was a little more boring than I thought.
Jake was, but the thing is, Joe, you're younger, so you're going to realize the older you get, I think that basically birthdays just become another day. Like people, like my daughter will ask me, she's like, why are you going to work on your birthday? I'm like, because it's another day. It's just, the way I see birthdays now is like, it's just a day where people shouldn't give you any crap. I think that's the best way for me to describe it. Like, I just don't want to get crap from anybody on my birthday.
So you've already failed, Joe.
What's that?
So you already failed in your attempt to not give a crap.
Yeah.
That is very true. Guys, as I mentioned in our last episode, this episode will be sponsored by Roto Tracker. Guys, I'll mention the beginning and at the end, where basically we want you guys to go. It's totally free to set up, rototracker.com/POR. And if you do that, you get the free membership, and if you ever upgrade to a premium, they're going to give you additional 10% off because of the show. Because it's a new tool for daily fantasy sports players to help you get a grip on game selection, which we're going to talk about here in a second with Joe. I don't know about you guys, but I've hated keeping track of all my spreadsheets, all the data on my CSV files, is I can never see what games I've done well in. So I was kind of keeping track of it myself. I wanted to be able to see something quickly and basically see how well I'm doing in cash, tournaments, where I need to improve for my next weekend of action. Now, that's where Roto Tracker comes in. As Joe can vouch as a user before they were our sponsor, this tool is a game changer. Roto Tracker lets you see all your results, data in one place. With browser extensions on Chrome and Firefox, that pulls your data from all the major DFS sites with just one click. Your data is kept up to date and barely lifting a finger. For those that really love digging into your data, if you're a big-time DFS player, Roto Tracker has the most comprehensive filtering and report functionality on the market. So although it's simple to use, Roto Tracker certainly packs an analytical punch. Again, sign up for the free Roto Tracker account now by going to rototracker.com/POR, as in process over results, and that automatically signs you up for a special partnership with them. If you ever upgrade to a premium subscription, again, you'll get 10% off. I know Joe has been using their product, and he stands by it. That's why I think they were an amazing sponsor for our show. I always want to believe in the sponsors that we ever get, and thanks to you guys, we're able to have a sponsor. So check them out, rototracker.com. And that leads us into Joe's segment of our show that we touch on every single week. This is a different one. So it's one where you might want to pay attention. Joe touches on some game selection. He sifts through all the game selection on FanDuel, on DraftKings, and he kind of figures out a couple tournaments, whether you're playing for small money, whether you're playing for big money. Joe, let's talk about your favorite tournaments to play in this week.
Yeah, things kind of change week to week as far as how the prize pools are structured, and especially on DraftKings, the rake's kind of fluctuating quite a bit too. So I just want to kind of go through every week some lower buy-in tournaments and then some stuff for the higher stakes as well, just to kind of get a grip on what the game selection's like for this week. This week's pretty standard at the lower buy-ins. I do like the $3 play action. If you guys are going to be doing some multi-entering, you do have a field of 470,000 people is the downside, but the prize pool is 1.2 million still, and you're getting paid out 27% of the field, which is pretty high compared to some of the ones on FanDuel for sure. But the rake is 14, almost 15%. So you will have to deal with that kind of at the lower stakes. Kind of at the mid-range, you can play the millionaire, but that prize pool has 26% of the payouts going to first place. And it's such a big field. I'm kind of steering clear of that. We do really I like some of these single entry ones kind of at this range, but I'm more often than not going to multi-enter at kind of the smaller stakes or go up a little bit. But if I was to play one at this one, it would probably be the blind side. It's a $27 single entry. At 29% of the field is getting paid out, and it's a little bit flatter. The prize pool is only giving out almost 7% to first place. So I really like that tournament at the mid-range. But going up to the higher stakes, there's two tournaments that I do really like. There's one that's the Power Sweep. It's a 3-max tournament for $150 buy-in, and 28% of the field's getting paid out, but just 7% to first, and the rake is just 10%. So really like that tournament at the high stakes. And then one last one, a little bit higher up, the Goal Line is also a kind of a smaller tournament. It's a single entry, $300 buy-in, but 29% of the field's getting paid out and just 9% rake. So really like that tournament as well.
I had my mic muted. So Joe, basically, we appreciate you going through that game data. It's something that not a lot of people do, and I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that people make when doing game selection. They just pick one of the tournaments that kind of fit, whereas you can maximize on your earnings potential by actually just listening to Joe every single week on the show. I don't know. I'm getting the vibe that you guys are not morning guys like me. I've kind of realized in like the fantasy industry that everybody stays up till like midnight, and I'm like, I'm old. I go to bed at like 9 o'clock. Am I weird, Jake?
Yeah, especially because you're not as old as I am. So what the heck are you doing already? Plus, you're in Arizona, so you're getting up earlier than us on top of it.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, no, it's Michael Moore from PFF. He's asked me, he's like, Mike, do you sleep like ever? Because like they'll be texting at like 9 o'clock, and then I'll wake up and I'm tweeting something at like basically 5 o'clock in the morning here. So I'm a morning person. I'm wide awake. I'm excited for this show. I feel like this is one of those weeks, like there's certain weeks where it's like there's so much chalk where it's like you have to differentiate yourself. I don't think there's many chalk plays this week. I just don't feel like there's any locks. When I was going through the players that I like, I don't think they're going to be very like extremely high owned because there's other options around that time. So this week is definitely a very interesting one. And I think those who have done their research, it's going to pay off. On top of that, people have slacked on their research this week because of it being Thanksgiving and all. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. As you guys know, after Joe's game selection, we go over to Jake every single week, and we ask him for his ace of the week. Week one, it was Tyrell Williams who dominated that game. That was a fantastic call. And I loved his call last week on LaShawn McCoy. Unfortunately, McCoy got hurt really early on in that game.
Good.
He did. He actually he didn't like give us like a 0 or anything like that. What did he score? I think 12 PPR points. So it wasn't a complete bust, but getting hurt, that's something out of our control. So let's go out to Jake. And Jake, who do you got for us this week, man?
Man, there's actually quite a few. I'm just struggling to pick one and not give everything else away. So I will settle on one person where I'm baffled at his price, and this is going to be a big hit. Maybe I got to see if Joe starts nodding along to find out who I'm talking about. His price is the lowest it's been all year at wide receiver for some reason. Are you nodding, Joe? Are you starting to nod? I want to see if you're on the same page.
Nope. Yeah.
All right. So Brandon Cooks, cheapest he's been all year. I do not understand it. For everyone that talks about, Drew Brees and his home road splits, Brandon Cooks is the same reason. This is actually the reason why I like Michael Thomas more for consistency because he doesn't have the home road splits. But if you look at Brandon Cooks, 21.4 fantasy points per game at home, and he's also got two games of 30-plus points at home so far this year when Drew Brees is averaging 366 yards and 3 touchdowns per game at home this season. Brandon Cooks should have a big day. It's a good matchup. Michael Thomas actually has the better of the two when you talk about somebody who should see most of the game, but it's not the entire time. Like they don't have anybody that really shadows or stays to one side of the field. But it's going to be a good matchup no matter what, and I just talked about it. Brandon Cooks at home with Drew Brees at home. This price is just – I really don't get it. I don't know what DraftKings is doing. I don't know if there's something we don't know about, but to see his price down at $6,800 is just absurd to me.
Yeah, no, Brandon Cooks has been a little bit inconsistent in his career, and I think that's why people might shy away from him in like a cash game. But I think in tournaments, that's definitely one of my favorite plays of the week. Scott Barrett, one of my colleagues at PFF, he posted something basically on Brandon Cooks against corners that are typically slower, and basically what he does against them versus the corners that are faster. Those with a sub 4.5 40, I think he struggles with, but those who are slower than that, he does really well against. And obviously at home, he scored 14 of his 19 touchdowns in his career at home. So you have to like that matchup. I actually seem to think that Trumaine Johnson might match up with Michael Thomas more, and just because he's a bigger, more physical cornerback, whereas Michael Thomas, if you match him up with EJ Gaines, he's going to eat him up all day. I have no issue with either of the Saints receivers, but I do like Cooks an awful lot. I like that call. All right. So let's start, as we always do, guys. We're going to start with quarterbacks. Joe, let's go with you. We'll start with you just because we just got Jake's lock of the week. So who do you like at quarterback? Let's do one high-priced one if people want to pay up, and then one more of a bargain.
Okay, well, I'm kind of in the mid-range for the guy I was going to talk about, so maybe I'll let Jake talk about someone a little bit higher. I do like Drew Brees as well, but my mid-range kind of guy, Derek Carr at 6,100 versus Carolina. I think that just Oakland's favored by 3.5 points at home, and the over-under is one of the highest on the main slate at 48 points. So I think that the Raiders, with this kind of team total against like a Panthers defense, I just really like Carr. He's thrown for at least 3 touchdowns in 2 of his last 3 games, but his salary's only been lower than this once all season. So I really like Carr this week, kind of in that middle range. I think sometimes people get too worried about if they're going to pay up or if they're going to pay down, and sometimes those guys in the middle, you can get it a little bit lower ownership.
I love the Carr call. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have allowed 20 passing touchdowns on the year through 10 games. And so 2 touchdowns a game, that's pretty solid. But it's even better for Derek Carr supporters this week is the fact that they've played against Case Keenum, Paxton Lynch, Derek Anderson, Colin Kaepernick, Jay Cutler. Their list of opponents hasn't been really good at all. So to see them allow 2 touchdowns per game, it's even better. If you guys recall the week that I was really on Derek Carr, the week that he threw over, it was 500 yards and 4 touchdowns or whatever it was. That was against this Tampa Bay defense. And on top of that, I'm talking about Tampa Bay now.
We have Carolina this week.
Carolina, Luke Kuechly. So I was actually talking about my play. My bad. I like Russell Wilson. But Luke Kuechly out for Carolina changes that defense a lot. Amari Cooper will match up. He's not going to see much of James Bradbury, who's their best cornerback. He'll line up on the other side of the field against Darryl Worley. So I do like Derek Carr. That's one of my bold names that I have on my sheet. So good call on that. We haven't disagreed enough. Jake, give us a name that we could disagree on.
I can't because you might as well talk because I was going to say Russell Wilson. You just ruined everything. So. Hey, you know what? I really like Kirk Cousins this week.
Oh, wow. That's good in hindsight, Jake. It's a hot take.
Just go ahead and talk about Russell Wilson. I'll tell you, the only thing probably you're going to not mention, I was just going to say the fact that the Buccaneers have given up 1,300 yards and 10 passing touchdowns the last 4 games. So that was part of the reason I like Russell Wilson. And then Joe ruined the other side of it. If I was going to go high price, I already threw out the fact that Drew Brees averages 366 yards and 3 touchdowns at home this season. So Drew Brees would be my high price. Russell Wilson would be my cheap one. So you guys just talk. I'll just sit back and listen.
Well, what do you get? Talk me out of Carson Palmer right now, because I actually kind of like Carson Palmer this week. It might just be my kind of Cardinals bias, but I mean, he's never been lower on DraftKings, and he played the Vikings last week. But before that, he'd thrown 340 yards in 3 straight games, and I mean, this over/under is so high that I feel like the points got to come from somewhere, and no one likes Palmer right now, which means that I kind of tend to like him a little bit in tournaments, at least in some lineups. So I'm thinking about playing him a bit this week, and I think I'll probably be overweight for sure.
I would definitely have ownership in him. I would have ownership in
the tournament's fine, but the problem is, what Desmond Trufant can do, and Larry Fitzgerald is repeating last year. Caught 4 touchdowns early in the season, has gone poof since. And who else is Carson Palmer throwing to right now?
He's not throwing deep either, is what's kind of frustrating. Like last year, he was throwing deep a lot more. Well, yeah, I mean, he doesn't have time.
Yeah, no, Evan Mathis, like one of the best guards in football, he's out. And then he lost Jared Veldheer, his left tackle. So Palmer's been sacked a lot lately, which it's a concern, but the Falcons don't have like an elite pass rush or anything like that. Desmond Trufant is actually rumored to be out for this game. They're calling him a game time decision, but one of the beat writers there expects him not to play.
I didn't realize he was going downhill like that.
Yeah, it's really odd. I thought he was going to play, considering they had the whole bye week and everything. But it appears that even if he's playing, it's probably at less than 100%. And I don't know if he even shadows Larry Fitzgerald. So we're going to talk about wide receivers in a minute. But I do like Carson Palmer as a tournament play. The concern,
5,300.
Yeah, that's the thing. So you would obviously stack him. My concern is that it seems like he's not going to have Michael Floyd, which is a problem because that means he essentially has no big outside wide receiver. So Larry Fitzgerald and David Johnson need to do everything. So I think if you're John Brown, I like John Brown. I actually love him as a receiver, but he's not like the possession receiver on the outside. A guy that's over 6 foot tall. I'm partial to big wide receivers though, guys. Like I love big wide receivers.
We're not going down you're on board with the Cooks call.
Well, I was on board with the Cooks call because I think the matchup calls for it, and they're in New Orleans, so you can't dislike Breeze. My concern is that Palmer just hasn't been very good this year. There's only been 2 games this year where 2 of the last 9 games where he's scored more than 15 fantasy points. So there's definitely a concern there with Palmer, but I do see the appeal in tournaments. I struggle thinking that the Falcons are going to score very many points in that game. I just don't know how they're going to score points in that game. I was looking at it. The Arizona defense Tyrann Mathieu is supposed to come back this week, right?
Joe?
I think it's still up in the air on that. I don't know if it's definitive.
Because if Mathieu plays, that basically removes Mohamed Sanu. Julio Jones is going to be taken on by Peterson. So I don't know. They don't allow much to the run, so I think it's going to be a tough game for Atlanta. It is in Atlanta, but what about Eli Manning, guys? I've heard a lot of people this week because usually what I do is I gather my thoughts and then I'll go and I'll listen to a couple shows. I had to take my daughter to the airport last night, early this morning, whatever you want to call it, and I was listening to a couple podcasts. It seems like not many people are talking about Eli Manning. A lot of people are talking about Russell Wilson, they're talking about Carr, but nobody's talking about Eli Manning against the Browns defense. Is there an issue with this matchup that I'm not seeing? Like, Jake, you're the New York guy.
Yeah, it's the fact that the Giants play down to their competition. Like, this is, as a Giants fan, I just have a bad feeling that they're going to be the ones that give the Browns the first win of 2016 because that's what they do. This is a game, yes, he should go out and throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, but they always just play to their competition. It's going to be, I think, a closer game than people realize. I think we see more Rashad Jennings now that they're starting to use him in the last 2 games like they were last year, which is the only thing that was starting to work at the end of last season was using Rashad Jennings as a lead running back. And now that they're back to that, I think it'll still be a good game. Like if you put money on it, I would still say the Giants are going to win, but I think this is going to be more of a 24-17, 24-20, 21-17 than expecting them to really get to 30 points just because this is just – the Giants just don't blow people out just for history-wise. It's frustrating as a fan. I just want to be able to enjoy a game and sit back and be like, ha-ha, we beat you 40-10. But it just doesn't happen with them. So I get where you're going, and like an Eli Manning, Odell Beckham stack would be very pretty, but I just don't know that the yardage – and if you look at it too, the touchdown – I actually wrote about this earlier this week is the fact that he's going through positive touchdown regression. As we all know, we talk about it in the industry too, is you can have positive regression. As earlier this season, he threw for 700 yards in 2 games, had 1 touchdown. That's not normal. And now, over the last 3 games, he has 700 yards, but 9 touchdowns. So that's almost going the complete opposite direction. So he's going to come back a little bit, and if he's throwing for 240 yards, that's probably more in the 2 touchdown range.
So I think after listening to Jake, I think what you could take away from that is Eli Manning is probably a better cash game quarterback than he is a tournament play. Because I think he's a lock to throw for 2 touchdowns this week. And so
he's not facing Drew Brees where they can go 6 for 7 back and forth.
Yeah. Well, that's the issue, though, is like when you look at everything in roster construction. So if we feel really good about Derek Carr, which we all seem to do, why would you pay up $400 more in cash to get to Eli Manning? And then in a tournament, Manning's not going to – I mean, I think you can go – I don't think Eli Manning is going to be extremely high-owned in tournaments. So, I mean, if you want a lineup – but I tend to listen to people that are from cities because, like, you know, people could ask me about the Bears, and I'll tell you about them it's because I understand them better than anybody. And that's why I like going to people that know their teams extremely well. So Joe saying that he likes Palmer, Jake saying that he'd probably fade Eli Manning is something. Real quick, guys, before we move on to running backs, What do you guys think about paying up for Tom Brady this week? I really wanted to like him because the Jets don't have a pass rush. Brady, when he's kept clean, he's got like 130 passer rating. Like, it's something ridiculous. Like, really good. Deion Lewis is back. There's so many reasons here, but my concern, I went and looked through the game logs. The last 2 games that he's played against the Jets in New York, 231 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 182 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. So he was under 13 points in both games. He was outside the top 20 fantasy quarterbacks. I know this is a worse Jets team than we've seen, like last year in 2014, but is that concerning to you guys, being a divisional game?
Yeah, I mean, I don't typically pay all the way up for a quarterback in cash games. I think he's a fine tournament play in a lot of ways because I think he did throw 50 passes in one of these games against the Jets, at least in the last couple of years too. That must have been at home though. But I don't know. I'm not overly excited about Brady this week. He's someone I'll probably have a little bit of tournament exposure to, but he's not really on my cash radar at this point. I think for some of the reasons you mentioned, and honestly, like, the Blunt is still around too. Like, I can't get over like some of the few times that I've played Brady this year. I feel like I always play him on the Blunt week, so it just kind of freaks me out.
Yeah. Jake, you feel the same way?
Yeah, pretty much. If I'm looking for paying up, it's going to be Drew Brees. If I'm going to go pay down, as somebody we didn't talk about, my boy that I've been using pretty much the past 3 or 4 weeks now, I'm going with Colin Kaepernick again. I don't know why. Nobody ever wants to use him. His floor is like a 15 and his ceiling's at 25. How many quarterbacks can you say that about?
That's true, but this week I'm going to tell you that I don't like, and honestly, usually I can understand the floor. This week I'm going in a different direction, and I'm going to tell you what it is in a second. But first, before I even say mine, Jake, we're going to let you start because we stole your quarterbacks. Let's have you start with running backs. Let's talk about a higher priced option. So if someone's going to pay up, who should they go with? And like, if you're looking at the bargain bin, like somebody maybe 5,500 or less, who would you go there?
Yeah, do you want just my high price and then come back and everybody do high price and then bargain bin, or are we doing everything right?
Yeah, just go at your high price. Go ahead.
All right. Well, there's 2 high price guys I'm looking at. The first one seems to be like a lot of people don't seem to be talking about him. I don't know if it was because of the bye week or whatever it was, but Melvin Gordon, in my opinion, at $7,000. Like, I've been trying to find a way to get him in every single one of my lineups because we know so far this year the way to beat the Texans is not through the air, it's through the ground, and everybody's been doing really well against them. They have been playing better of late now with the way that I can't even say his first name for some reason. It's too early in the morning. David County, thank you very much, has been playing better of late, and it's really started to help their run defense, but I still expect him to have a huge day. And the fact is, our complaint was the yards weren't there. All he was doing was scoring touchdowns. Well, right before the bye, he's starting to get the yards, and now he's doing the best of both worlds. And for what he's doing this year, I know there were some people out in the world that are saying, hey, he's undervalued, don't write him off this season. Nobody was expecting Melvin Gordon to do this. And there's not one person out there, if they're telling you that, they're a bold-faced liar for the fact that he's getting these kind of touchdowns. I think he's going to have another terrific week. And the other one I'm paying up for is a similar situation, but he's actually cooled off himself, and his offensive line has major, major issues, but nobody has a better matchup this week in Jay Ajayi. Is the fact that if you look at the 49ers, not only do they give up the most fantasy points to running backs, they've actually widened their gap over the last 5 games for what they've been giving up over second place, which is the Browns. And it's just an unbelievable matchup. And I know they could be down 3 offensive linemen, but at this point, you're facing the 49ers, and you could put Mike at center, and I think we'd be okay.
You don't want to put me at center. Believe me, that's not going to be a good time for anybody.
Right guard? Can we get you there?
Maybe right guard. We could talk about that. Joe, who do you like to pay up for? David Johnson, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I like David Johnson. You guys know this. But, I mean, those are 2 of my top guys that we just talked about, Melvin Gordon, Jay Ajayi. Gordon, 25 touches per game, leading the league in carries, and inside the 20, 10, and the 5 right now. So I'm playing a lot of Gordon right now, kind of in the few lineups that I have constructed kind of this morning. Jay Ajayi, I mean, he's one of 4 teams. He's favored by at least a touchdown. Miami's team total is really high and home favorite. I mean, he's at the top of pretty much all of my models right now. One guy kind of at that price range, kind of at the higher that I think people might be scared off of is LaShawn McCoy. Yeah. I think I'm going to play a good amount of him in tournaments this week just because I think a lot of people are going to pay for Jay Ajayi or Melvin Gordon, and he's kind of right in that exact price range, and he also is a home favorite with a pretty large spread, too, against Jacksonville. So if I had to pick one, I think people kind of got burned by McCoy, myself included, last week. He was one of my highest exposures in tournaments along with AJ Green. So that'll kind of give you an idea of how my week went. But yeah, if I had to pick one, kind of in that higher price range, I do really like LaShawn McCoy.
I like McCoy too, and I think you'll get him at lower ownership because of the surgery on his hand and whatnot, and how people were burned by him last week. I do like him. Jake, going back to Jay Ajayi, I think the offensive line is a real concern. They're going to be missing 3 offensive linemen. The reason I think it's a concern for me enough to get me off Ajayi is because his ownership is going to be ridiculous against the 49ers. I don't know if game script. I don't know if this game is going to be as one-sided as it was supposed to be now, that the offensive line, because Tannehill's not going to have time because his entire almost left side of his offensive line is out. That's gonna hurt. I think it helps Jarvis Landry more than anything. But for me, if I saw Ajayi where he should be priced, I thought he was going to come out around 6,800, something like that. I thought he would have been like a great own, but considering he's up at 76, I'm with you guys on Gordon. I think Gordon's a fantastic play. You're right. I liked Melvin Gordon coming into this year, but there was no way that you could have predicted this outbreak that he's kind of had. Danny Woodhead's injury kind of changed everything there. David Johnson, it's tough because if I want to pay up for a tight end this week, it's kind of a week where I kind of feel like I do, and I rarely ever pay up at tight end. It's tough to fit in David Johnson into a lot of different lineups without taking a lot of risk in cash. But I do obviously like him. Are you guys not feeling DeMarco Murray against the Bears at all?
I always like DeMarco Murray, but for the price, that's the one area of the Bears defense that has been doing really well this year is their run defense. So I think this is a matchup where I think we see a little bit more. This is the last week that I'm in on Mariota and the desired Titans passing game, honestly. And I think that's how you're going to beat the Bears, on top of the fact that it should be the fact that you're up early, and Matt Barkley being that quarterback helps that, and that kind of leans towards DeMarco. But at the same time, I kind of have this feeling in the back of my mind, if they really are up and they're up in the third quarter, we could see some Derrick Henry keeping DeMarco Murray fresh for the rest of the season.
I actually would agree with you on that. That's the one concern I would have about DeMarco Murray. Though the Bears, they do have a couple guys out with injuries in their front seven. 2 of the front 7 are out with injuries. So it's not going to be the same Bears defense as you would typically see, though I do get the concern. And I think that's why a lot of people are kind of not talking about Murray. So if we go down a little bit, I'm going to give my value. And the reason that I'm not huge
before we get to value, because you had a question, I have a question for you guys on the high price one that I'm surprised nobody seems to be on. Why do you think there's nobody on Spencer Ware this week?
I actually have him in bold. I like him. I think in tournaments you can get him at extremely low ownership. I think his last 2 weeks were tougher matchups than people understand, I think. Tampa Bay with Gerald McCoy are a lot better run defense than Tampa Bay without Gerald McCoy. Spencer Ware I do like an awful lot this week, and I think you can get him in tournaments at crazy low ownership. I know that me and Joe are fans, but Joe, how do you feel about him? Are you just tired of being burned by him, or are you okay with him?
No, I still like the upside there. I've pretty much been playing him every week. I probably play him more than anyone does, which has been good some weeks and bad. But I think there's still a lot to be said about playing against Denver. I think just the casual fan just isn't going to click Spencer Ware this week, which I think there could be a little bit of leverage there. I mean, he's still probably going to get 20 touches, you would think. And I think that, the kind of talent and even like the guys around him, like his price point, like a lot of people are probably going to be, I'm sure we'll talk about him soon, but people are going to be paying down to a guy like Thomas Rawls for $400 cheaper. So I think he could be kind of a nice leverage play in tournaments, not going there in cash. Cause he is on the road and he's not a favorite in this game. And I play a lot of home favorite running backs in cash, but in tournaments, I don't mind him at all.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that's what I'm saying. I just think the ownership would be low on top of the Denver thing. But Denver is not the same run defense that they've been in years past. They've been allowing plenty of yardage on the ground.
They're one of the worst.
Yeah, and it seems, especially over like the past, month? Like they've been awful. They're now allowing over, I think, 4.3 yards per carry. But earlier in the season, it was down around 3. So that number has skyrocketed over the past month. But one player who I'm going down to 4,800 to get is the reason I don't like Colin Kaepernick is because I think this is a Carlos Hyde game. I think that Chip Kelly came out on Monday and said that they need to get back to Carlos Hyde being the focal point of the offense, and I believe him. And there's really no reason that they should go away from that. There's a reason I liked Todd Gurley last week. I like Carlos Hyde this week. At 4,800 to get someone at his talent level, guaranteed 18 touches like he's going to be in this game, I need to hear someone like give me an argument against Carlos Hyde. Like he's a really good football player. Do you guys have an argument against him?
I'm not going to argue against Carlos Hyde. I'll argue against, maybe the fact of the matchup is I don't think people realize how good the Dolphins' run defense is. That's the only aspect. That's the only area I would come against Carlos Hyde, but the price almost throws that out the window because I'm going to be bringing up a player that kind of throws the argument of matchup out the window because it's even worse. One of the things I do over on Roto Experts is I have FPAD, which is fantasy points adjusted for defense, and it's basically it kind of calculates because you guys know the argument is you can't just use fantasy points allowed because if you face Aaron Rodgers every single week or Jared Goff every single week, of course you're going to be giving up more fantasy points facing Aaron Rodgers. So there's other sites that do the exact same thing, but I use a ton of calculations that come up with adjusted fantasy points allowed. And Miami's actually the 5th toughest in my FPAD. It's actually, I'm looking at it right now, it's 13.3 fantasy points adjusted for defense allowed per game. So the matchup is tough, but at the price and for the fact this looks like it's going to be a grinded out game on both sides of the ball, I'm with you. I don't think Carlos Hyde is a bad play.
Fair enough. Joe, what's your take on him?
Yeah, I like him kind of for the same reasons we do a similar metric at 4 for 4 adjusted fantasy points against. And Miami is one of the toughest matchups as far as on paper for running backs. But I think with Chip Kelly, just the pace in general, I think that kind of throws a lot of that kind of stuff out the window. Because if you can get 20 touches from Carlos Hyde at 4,800, I think he's a really good value, especially when he's kind of around like the Darren Sproles and James Starks of the world down there. So I do really like him. There's a couple other lower price guys that are a little bit higher that I like probably a little bit more, but I definitely, if I was to kind of get on one side of that, I think I'm definitely on Mike's side as far as the running game as opposed to like Kaepernick in the passing game.
Do you have, where does 4 to 4 have Miami? Are they the 5th, 6th, 7th toughest? Do you have that?
At least on this slate, yeah, where I think they're like 6th toughest or so.
Okay. I should tell you, hey, good guys at 4 for 4 on the same page as me tell you how tough the defense is.
Yeah, no, those are good. Those are good stats, guys, and it's kind of something to keep in mind for maybe the cash game player. Maybe it's not as safe as I thought, but it's still at 4,800 to get that volume. I like it. I think he's got a good shot to score. We saw Gurley score against them last week, even though Gurley he did a lot in the first quarter, and then after that he did nothing. So if you allow Todd Gurley to do something against you, there's an issue with your defense, I think. No, but let's talk about some other cheap options that you guys like. Joe, who do you got that's like cheaper, like maybe, like I said, maybe in that 55 and lower range?
Yeah, I mean, Jake touched on him earlier. I think Rashad Jennings is definitely in play this week. He is at 5,600, but at Cleveland, I mean, he's averaging 4.78 yards per carry in his last 2 games, and he's starting to get that volume that we saw towards the end of last year. And I think one of the mistakes I made personally last year is I didn't kind of get on the Jennings train early enough. And I think he's at 18 touches and 26 in his last 2 most recent games. And then he had 6 targets in each as well, which is something on DraftKings, especially at that lower price range, that is really appealing to me. And then talking about kind of those adjusted metrics, the Browns are ranked 29th in running back adjusted fantasy points against for our 4 for 4 metric. So I do really like Rashad Jennings. I'm almost looking there almost a little bit more than Eli Manning. I think that's maybe why he wasn't really on my radar so far. So I've got a lot of Jennings right now, especially in tournaments.
I like that call. Would you rather play Jennings over Thomas Rawls?
That's tough for me because Thomas Rawls is one of my guys from the summer, but I still kind of want to see it first from him. I know last year he got 17 touches or so and 88 yards, and I do really like him for the rest of the season, but as kind of like that, resume that feature back role there. But he's on the road, and the Bucs, like you talked about, they are a little bit more impressive now that they're getting a little bit healthier. So I don't know. I like Rawls. I think I like Jennings a little bit more. Maybe I'm going to get burned by that and feel dumb because I did like Rawls so much this offseason.
I don't think that's bad at all. I'd probably play Jennings over him as well. Jake, what about you?
That question or my low price option? Which question?
Both. How do you feel about Jennings versus Rawls?
I'd still go Rawls. I was excited about the fact of how aggressive he runs still coming off the injury. If you look at it, everybody says, oh, he runs angry. I hate that because it's kind of a cliche, but he runs aggressive. If you saw when he's touching the ball, his legs and his body, it just churns more than it needs to. And he comes out of the game saying, hey, I was banged up already with my 40 touches. But at the same time, this is a guy that outperformed Marshawn Lynch last year. So I think you have to like him for the fact that CJ Prosise, which just still pains my heart that he got hurt and he's out for the season. But at the same time, I think it's just that. It's the volume. He's going to get that where the Giants are still going to sprinkle in Paul Perkins. What does Rawls have to worry about? Alex Collins? What do you do? I just don't think that's something you have to worry as much about. So for my low-priced option, to kind of allude to what I was saying about before with I'm ignoring the matchups here, and it's more so a cash. I might throw him in one or two tournaments just because he could always get 2 touchdowns. Jeremy Hill at $3,900. The backfield is his. He's going to get 20 touches a game, and the biggest concern about Jeremy Hill has always been, he's only going to get 9 touches this week, or he only gets 10, and now he's only got 40 yards. But every single time he gets around 20 touches, the lowest you usually get is about 70, 80 yards, which isn't terrific, but that automatically gives him 2 times value. If he can just find the end zone once, he's going to hit 3 times value. If he has one of those games where he can find the end zone twice, and I know it's the Baltimore Ravens, and as I mentioned, they are the toughest for the adjusted fantasy points allowed, but they're also the toughest in fantasy points allowed, period. Everybody knows that. But divisional game, Jeremy Hill's done well against them before when they've had good defenses. It's more so $3,900 for a feature back that's going to get 20 touches. It's hard for me not to put him in a cash lineup.
Well, that's the thing. So with Jeremy Hill, I saw that price too, and I was like, man, because Jeremy Hill was somebody I wrote my last fantasy stock market piece for PFF this week, and I said trade for Jeremy Hill because I think good days are coming. This is not one of those weeks. I think this is one that we'll disagree on, just because I think Jeremy Hill, if you look over the last 3 weeks, he's had 20 carries, 15, 16, and he's topped out at 14 DraftKings points. So it's not really giving you much upside. In cash, I suppose you could make the argument at 3,900, although one of my rules is don't play any running back against the Ravens because they are so good. And I think the Ravens try and grind out this game. It's a division game. It's a must win. I think that they're going to total maybe 30 carries as a team between them. And honestly, I may rather play Terrence West for 4,000 than Jeremy Hill at 39.
No.
I'm steer clear in general, I think. I think Jeremy Hill's fine play volume-wise. I just don't know how big his upside is in this matchup. But I think Cincinnati's just going to have a really hard time moving the ball in this game. And I think a lot of Hill's equity has to do with touchdowns. And I think if he doesn't get in the end zone, which they might not be in scoring position a whole lot in this game, I don't know if he's really a tournament play for me, ceiling-wise.
Good, we finally disagree. And in your face when he does well.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I was looking for. All right, so that's one of the first disagreements on the show. Anybody else cheap that you guys are looking at? Doug Martin at 49. Does he interest you guys? He doesn't really. I don't know. He hasn't shown me anything to believe that he's going to dominate any defense at this point.
And Seattle. So
yeah, I think that's it for me and cheap guys. Talking about Rawls though, I mean, and not to backtrack at all, but I'm definitely going to have some looking kind of back at some of my notes from last year. He was above expectation by 11.5% in the run game last year, just considering his offensive line and some of the stuff I do with rushing expectation. But another big thing is, we talked about this in one of the other podcasts, in regards to his yards before contact, he was at 6.8 yards per attempt. And in my 20-player sample, that was just trailing guys like Amir Abdullah and Tevin Coleman that run a lot to the outside. So I really like Rawls just because of how quick of a runner he is, but he plays with such a low center of gravity. And I guess you talk about how he runs violently, but as far as yards before and after contact, he was one of the guys that performed the best in my methodology.
Aggressively. Don't fall into the cliche. Aggressively.
All right, we'll go with he's an aggressive runner.
He's an aggressive runner. He doesn't run angry. He just runs aggressively.
How about 4,000 on Dion Lewis, guys?
Before we go on to wide receivers, guys, do you guys have any interest in Todd Gurley?
No.
I worry about game script really bad in this game.
Yeah, I'm more worried that he's Trent Richardson.
Yeah, it's starting to trend that way.
He's not Trent Richardson. Don't you put that evil on anybody.
Hold on, Jake. So wait a minute. So when you're getting as much volume as somebody like Todd Gurley is every single week, and not to break a 20-yard run all season, part of the problem is on him. I'm not saying that he's been in ideal situations. I'm not saying he's awful, but I'm saying I think a lot of people may have over predicted him.
It's just every week.
I think at some point we have to say some of it's on him.
Every week, right? We're just it's
over-predicted him as in talent?
Yeah, like basically saying that he was a better talent than he actually is.
Oh, you're crazy. You're out of your mind.
But if you look at it, after the first few games that he had as a rookie, he trended downhill towards the end of last year, and then this year he's obviously been – I mean, the team that they had around him last year was no different than it was this year. Honestly, you could argue that Kenny Britt's been playing a lot better. You could say that Case Keenum played better than Nick Foles did last year. There's things that are better about this team, but Todd Gurley is just not – doing anything. I don't know. I think at some point, I'm just saying, at some point, I think we have to put the blame on Todd Gurley is all.
Well, what's the blame? That's what I'm asking.
That he's not breaking anything. Like, nothing. Like, he seriously does not have a 20-yard run this season. And how many carries does he have?
Yeah, he's also getting hit. Look at how many times he gets hit. He can't even get to the second level without having 3 guys on him.
Well, let's think. Benny Cunningham is the same thing. Like, so Benny Cunningham is on the same team. He's had like 30 carries.
Benny Cunningham is being used a lot differently. It's not that simple. The fact that you say one between the two. If they was actually, if you look at the last few games where they finally started using Todd Gurley in the passing game, starting to get him in some space, he's been able to do a lot more. Granted, Todd Gurley might not be one of the best 5 running backs in the league like some people were saying, but I think for the fact that if we're going to start writing them off already, remember Melvin Gordon. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, no, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that Todd Gurley is like an awful running back. I'm just saying some of the blame has to be placed on him. He's got 187 carries this year. He's averaging 3.2 yards per carry. That's one of like the worst marks of all time, I'm sure, with running backs that are coming up on 200 carries. So I have my concerns about him as a talent a little bit, but I'm not saying he's awful. I'm just saying that some blame has to be placed on him.
No, but Joe threw out the Trent Richardson. I have a problem with that.
I mean, it's getting to that point as far from an efficiency standpoint for sure, but he is in the worst situation possible. I do kind of agree with you there, but I think he does have a little bit of the blame, but just like the whole name value thing that he has just has him kind of just unappealing to me because I can just play at least this week Rashad Jennings or Thomas Rawls in the same price range. But I mean, I'm fine with not being on Gurley if he does break out, when he does break out, just because it's like, we're in week 12. Like, we've been waiting for this all year. I'm not going to keep chasing that. Not that I've been doing it a whole lot anyway, but I'm fine. I won't lose any sleep if he blows up, honestly, because there won't be many guys on him. And the ones that have been on him are the ones that have probably been on him most of the year.
Right. Let's go into wide receivers. My favorite play at wide receiver this week is probably Larry Fitzgerald. Are you guys with me on that one? I don't like, not only is Trufant maybe not playing, but Trufant typically doesn't shadow slot wide receivers, and Fitzgerald plays in the slot almost 70% of the time. He'll match up with Brian Poole. Brian Poole has, there's been 4 games this season where Brian Poole has seen 7 or more targets in coverage, and in those games he allowed a touchdown in 3 of them. So I do think Larry Fitzgerald gets back in the end zone this week. I think he's a lock for 10 targets against Atlanta. Is there anything not to like about Fitzgerald, guys?
A lot.
I think he's fine in tournaments and cash. Doug Baldwin is another one that I like an awful lot. His price just hasn't caught up with his production. Tampa Bay, I mentioned earlier, they lost their slot cornerback. I don't know if they're going to move Vernon Hargreaves into the slot. He's been torched by outside receivers all year, so I don't know why they would do that, but they're kind of running out of options. So my 2 favorite plays are Larry Fitzgerald and Doug Baldwin. Jake, who do you have at wide receiver? Who are a couple of your favorite plays?
I already told you Brandon Cooks was one of them. That's the lock. If you don't like him, take Michael Thomas. Take one of them. Take both of them. Go stack Drew Brees, Michael Thomas, and Brandon Cooks in the tournament. It's going to be one of those types that you could get a lot of payout from. So I love both of them, obviously. I wish Jordan Matthews was playing in the Sunday slate. If you are going to play a slate that carries over to that game, then I think you have to look at him. I know that his production hasn't been there terrifically over the last 4 games, but if you look at that first of the 4 games, the fact that 14, 10, 10, 10 on the targets, and if you're looking at the matchup here, he's getting Micah Hyde. Ooh, Micah Hyde, hello. That's a terrific matchup because people are always thinking Jordan Matthews. Similar to Michael Thomas, they don't really put the 2 together for your uninitiated people playing or knowing the real aspects of football, understand that there's slot flankers that play that role out of that position but aren't the true slot receivers. So I like both of them. If I'm going to go, are we sticking to high price right now or should I hold off on my low price?
No, just give a couple of your favorite guys. You can go any way you want.
I love Sterling Shepard. If you are going to attack this game, I'd actually rather pay down for him than to take Odell Beckham. I think that this is, if you look at the last 3 games, the first 3 games of the season, he went through that quiet stretch, but now that Victor Cruz got banged up and he came back, and he's not even the Victor Cruz that was back at the beginning of the season after all the injuries. Sterling Shepard is really starting to take over that number 2, and he's been alternating in and out of the slot, which is where he can do a lot of damage with Odell Beckham, which is good for him. But the cheaper priced option that I love this week is Devontae Parker. I think that Devontae Parker, who I've been a big fan of since he came out of college, and he's getting back to what he was doing late last year. And I know we always have to rely on Ryan Tannehill when it comes to Devontae Parker. But again, he's looking really good. He's got 18.3 and 21.9 points over the last 2 weeks, and that's standard scoring. That's not even DraftKings scoring. Or no, that's DraftKings scoring. I got it backwards. That's DraftKings scoring. So if you're looking at what he's doing, and it's the 49ers matchup, the second most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. And I just think that if you look at Devontae Parker at $4,700, 3 times value is a cakewalk.
Yeah, I've heard some people on him too, and people that I respect. The only issue with me is that offensive line. Devontae Parker's been doing a lot of his damage down the field, and if they have 3 offensive linemen out, I worry about time for Tannehill. So that's my concern, but he is dirt cheap. I think.
Well, here's the good thing, too. Here's the 49ers, if you look at it, this is one of the things I look at, too, on Football Outsiders, on the sides of the field. So defending the middle, right, and left. The 49ers are the worst in the league at defending the right side of the field, which is Devontae Parker's side almost about 70-80% of the time. Okay.
It's a good stat. That's a good stat.
I think Parker's going to be pretty chalky at 4,700. I know a lot of really sharp people are on him for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. I mean, 8 targets in consecutive games. And, I mean, he's had at least 100 yards or a score in every game that he's surpassed that 8-target mark. So if he does that again against the 49ers, which he probably will, he's going to have no problem kind of hitting value. Really like the Sterling Shepard call, just to kind of touch on that again. I mean, they have been terrible against slot receivers. I mean, guys like Kendall Wright, Jarvis Landry, Jordan Matthews, like all those guys have kind of gone off against this team. So really like him against the Browns this week in the slot. I played actually a good amount of Sterling Shepard last week just because of the win concerns in that game, and he ended up with a touchdown. So that worked out pretty well. But 5,500, I thought he kind of price would have gone up a bit. Yeah, going through my list, you guys touched on that one. Okay. The one guy that I did want to talk about, Amari Cooper. I did mention Derek Carr earlier, but 7,700 against Carolina. And Cooper's done really well against defenses this year that play kind of a lot of zone. And I think he's going to run the majority of his routes against Darryl Worley, isn't he?
Yep.
So, I mean, he's ranked 82nd out of 119 guys in PFF grades. So I really like Cooper. I mean, he's one of the only wide receivers on this slate that's averaging over 18 points per game. So really like Cooper. Yeah. I think anytime he's played a lot of the Monday games lately, and then he had that bye too. So I think a lot of people kind of aren't thinking about him. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll be super high owned, but I do really like Cooper a lot.
Speaking of high,
it depends because I think a lot. Go ahead.
Point first, Mike, because you're pivoting. I'm pivoting off to something else. So go ahead.
Well, I like Cooper a lot, actually. Like, it's just so basically, if I'm starting 3 wide receivers and I want to pay up, I could do Cooper, Fitzgerald, and Baldwin, and then basically that's when you're not going to get the guys like David Johnson and DeMarco Murray in your lineup. So I do love Cooper. They've been really predictive this year, the Raiders. Basically, if there's a matchup where Amari Cooper is against like a shutdown cornerback, Derek Carr's done what he should be doing. Honestly, he's going to Seth Roberts, he's going to Michael Crabtree, and that's been working. There is no shutdown corner in Carolina. Carolina, as I mentioned, they're a funnel defense. They're missing their captain and Luke Kuechly now. Their best pass rushers out, and that doesn't really matter too much when you have a Raiders offensive line that is ranked 2nd in PFF's offensive line ranking. So I think they're going to struggle. Amari Cooper is a technician when he's running his routes. Like, good luck, Darryl Worley, is all I have to say. And Amari Cooper, I think he's a fantastic play. I think you can play him in cash and tournaments at 7,700. So I do like that call, Joe. What were you going to say, Jake?
I was going to say, for somebody that I think people are going to jump on for a misconception reason, but I didn't see a lot of people on him to begin with, Mike Evans, and now the fact they're going to hear the Earl Thomas, and even though Earl Thomas, not as big of a factor of what people might think, because some people are saying, oh, now Cameron Brate, what about getting a lineup where I get Jameis Winston now, where I wasn't going to use him before? Do you see Mike Evans actually seeing his ownership tick up because of this? And again, for probably the wrong reason, but he was somebody that a lot of people weren't going to pay because of his price, and the fact he's facing Seattle.
I am not. So basically, I've been on record to say that I'm not the biggest Mike Evans fan. Now, this year, I loved him as like a top 5 wide receiver in redraft because of all the targets he was going to see. Like, I just don't know if he's talented enough to beat Richard Sherman. Richard Sherman's still a very good cornerback in the NFL. I don't think Mike Evans is a top 5 wide receiver talent. I think that he's a top 5 fantasy wide receiver because of the volume he sees. There are some really big concerns. Deshaun Sheed, which is the corner that plays outside in the perimeter opposite of Sherman, he's going to be out for this game, I was told. Right. Earl Thomas is out. Michael Bennett's out. So this is not the same Seattle defense that we're used to seeing. I have no issue taking a shot at Mike Evans in like a tournament lineup where I just wouldn't have too much exposure just because I'm not fully convinced that he's a better wide receiver than Richard Sherman is a cornerback. That's basically my take on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I do really like Cooper in that range, obviously, but as far as tournaments, I think that you'll be able to get him at a really low ownership because of Sherman. And if he breaks
Cooper's only 200 more, I'd see a lot of people going your way on Cooper.
Yeah, I think it's a good pivot. Yeah, if you want to get some exposure. Yeah.
I mean, he's only going to be 5% owned, 5 to 8% owned probably this week. So
yeah. I think 8's max. Like, I don't think it's even. I honestly would say it's probably closer to 5.
Cooper is probably going to be at least 20% in those larger tournaments, I would think. I just don't see a lot of options kind of in that top range if you're not going to go all the way up to Odell Beckham. I think Doug Baldwin will kind of be a chalk play this week, and then Fitzgerald, and then one guy we still didn't talk about. We didn't talk about him much till the end last week either. But Julian Edelman still in a fantastic spot this week, and I think he's going to be one of the chalk plays as far as one of the higher owned guys. But I mean, the kind of targets that he's been getting lately, I normally have been kind of steering clear of this offense sometimes just because it's so hard to predict where it's going to go. But with Gronk out, Edelman is just getting so many targets that I think that his price is still pretty much broken at 6,400.
Yeah, I think he's going to be pretty heavily owned too, because I think people target the Jets now in matchups, but that'll lead us into tight ends. And I think Martellus Bennett is a good post-hype play this week against the Jets. The Jets allow the 9th most fantasy points to tight ends. And the thing is like you look at who they've played since week 4. They played Jesse James, Gresham, Pitta, Barnidge, the combination of Dolphins tight ends. Like, they haven't played very much competition. When they played against Jimmy Graham, they allowed 6 for 113. They allowed Kelsey 6 for 89 and a touchdown. With their lack of pass rush, do you guys think that Martellus Bennett makes for a great tournament play?
It probably, because people are going to be off of him after last week, and for the fact that he's banged up too, although it sounds like he should be fine to play. But I think that's the only reason why is I'm not the biggest Martellus Bennett fan when Gronkowski's not in the lineup. I think he's better with him out there, honestly. I think this goes back to the Aaron Hernandez days. So you look at what happened last week, and I know you can't expect the exact same thing, especially if the volume is going to be there. But I do. I actually think that if you watch Martellus Bennett's games, I think he looks better when Gronkowski's on the field with him than without. So I think a lot of people are going to be thinking the same thing and off of him. So that's why I think he does make a good tournament play. I'm actually staying away from him in cash.
Yeah, I would stay away in cash. I think the cash play this week is Barnikowski, right?
Like Barnidge, yeah. But just one more thing. I wrote up Bennett this week on my 4for4 article. So I really like Bennett for a lot of the reasons kind of that you said. But just from a metric standpoint, I mean, they're always a pretty heavy favorite, but their team total is still so high. So definitely interested in Bennett. I think that, we should still be interested in him for a lot of the same reasons that he was chalk last week. I mean, Twitter's going to go crazy when he finally just goes off. Like, can you just already picture it? Like, oh, finally he does it this week when everyone had him last week. So I'm going to be one of the people that has him this week too.
Who's one of your favorite other plays? Who do you got, Joe, at tight end outside of him? And maybe, because like I said, Barnidge is kind of chalky. Who else do you like at tight end?
I do like going up in tournaments to Jimmy Graham at Tampa Bay. I mean, he's scored double-digit DraftKings points in 6 over his last 8 games, and his price has come down $800 in the last 4 weeks. So I really like when kind of those prices do stuff that don't make sense. So I think his target share has been kind of ridiculous for a tight end, and even up at 5,300 for not a lot of high-priced options this week. I think you can kind of be a little bit unique like that. Gary Barnidge, I mean, if McCown's at quarterback, he's at 3,600 against the Giants. I think he's got a good chance of reaching the end zone. And the Giants have allowed 55-plus yards to 5 tight ends in their last 4 games. So,
yeah, they've really been struggling against tight ends. So, Jake, who do you like at tight end?
Barnidge is a good one. The Giants, as I mentioned last week, for Zach Miller. Before that, and Tagliere Eifert that last week, they just they don't do a very good job at stopping anybody who's half decent at the tight end position. And Gary Barnidge got the touchdown last week, McCown back at quarterback, so you have to like that. I like my boy CJ Fedorowicz. Why does nobody like CJ Fedorowicz? I don't know why.
I like him.
Yeah, it's every single week the guy's productive outside the terrible matchups. He was on the road at Minnesota for a bad game, on the road at Denver. And I think there's like one other that was kind of a weak one. Was it on the road against Jacksonville, I think? I don't remember off the top of my head. There was one other one. But outside of that, he's been getting the targets every single game. He's the production every single game. He's been one of the most reliable options in that offense before Brock Osweiler. I just don't know why more people won't accept the fact that CJ Fedorowicz is a top 10 tight end. And yes, top 10 tight end.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. His targets, he's had at least 5 targets in every game since the start of week 4.
Tennessee.
Yeah, and like you said, at Jacksonville, he had 5 for 26. That's kind of like his floor, it seems. 5 catches for 26.
People don't realize Jacksonville's defense has been pretty good against the pass and actually really good against tight ends this year.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, so when we're talking about Fedorowicz, we're talking about 3,300 guys. That's like, I think that he's a great play for cash. I think in tournaments you have to go away because I think a lot of smart people are on him. I think that the public are the ones that won't come around on CJ Fedorowicz, basically because they just say Brock Osweiler's terrible, and if DeAndre Hopkins can't do anything, then neither can he. I think that he's the safety blanket. I think that's where Brock Osweiler looks first now. I think that's what he wants to do. So that I do like Greg Olsen if you could fit him into your lineups, if you could pay up for him. This is one of the weeks where I think you can get him at low ownership because there are some other options that are cheaper than him, like Jimmy Graham, like Delaney Walker against the Bears, but Greg Olsen, he hasn't performed the last month, and I think he's an interesting tournament play if you want to pay up a tight end.
I have a feeling that Jordan Reed is going to go ham this week.
Really, I'm going to make a lineup with Jordan Reed just to see how that goes. I don't think he's going to play next week. He's got a grade 3 shoulder separation now. It's crazy. I don't know what they did in the locker room. He came back out there playing and landed on his shoulder. I'm like, okay, that can't be too bad of an injury. The dude just dove like what was that, like a 30-yard pass? Like falling onto his shoulder that was hurt.
I know, you gotta love Twitter too. Then you get people talking about me, like, oh, look at Jordan Reed and LaShawn McCoy can't even finish the game with a dislocated finger. Like, I hate people on Twitter sometimes.
Most people don't understand that LaShawn McCoy, his bone was through his skin. That's why LaShawn McCoy couldn't be back in. It was a dislocated finger that couldn't be popped back into place. That's why he needed surgery on it. Fortunately, having my wife is a nurse, like she's able to describe a lot of these things to me, including the whole Rob Gronkowski injury. Like she told me that it wasn't a punctured lung before everybody else on Twitter knew it wasn't a punctured lung. But it's kind of crazy, the stuff that you get to learn. I know more about injuries now than I ever have before. So, guys, it is time where we're going to create a DraftKings tournament lineup. And so for you guys listening, it's important that you guys know this is not a lineup that you want to use in cash. We're trying to have a contrarian lineup so that in a tournament you could do well with it. So if you guys want to toss us into a tournament lineup, let us know how it does. I'd be curious. I know last week we had a couple injuries in the lineup, which kind of, I think everybody had injuries last week, to be honest. So it was just one of those black, dark weeks. So let's get back on track this week. Let's see. Who started last week? I don't even remember who started last week.
Start us off.
So I'll start us off. I'm putting Martellus Bennett in our tight end spot.
Okay.
I wanted to play him. So Martellus Bennett is a tight end. That's 4,500. It's not too bad. And I just think it's rare to find someone with 100-yard upside, 2-touchdown upside like he does have. And I know, Jake, I know what you're saying, better with Gronk in the lineup, and that actually might be true. I just think with the Jets, he doesn't need to be kept in to pass block.
Yeah.
All right. So, Joe, who do you got for our next player?
Let's go Amari Cooper.
Amari Cooper, nice.
Since we're going pretty cheap. Well, I guess he's 5,500. We'll have to have some cheap guys too.
Yeah. So, Jake, you could basically, you could take whoever you want. I'm probably going to end up just stacking Cooper with Carr.
Well, yeah, you got to take the all-in pick of the week, man. Brandon Cooks.
There you go, Brandon Cooks. I like it. All right, so I'm going to take Derek Carr just because you want the stack there. He's cheap, 6,100.
Let's go. We got room for LaShawn McCoy?
Who's the defense you guys are on? Let's just get this out of the way with the defense. Like, if we were to look at the cheapest,
you want to go contrarian? Saints.
I actually like that call a lot. I actually like the Saints defense. I think they're a high floor option with a ceiling because Jared Goff didn't take any chances last week because Miami didn't go out like in this huge lead, whereas New Orleans is going to be a different story. He's going to be forced to throw the ball downfield. So I love that call, actually.
Yeah,
the only number one wide receiver to score against them all year was Demaryius Thomas. They don't let number one wide receiver score. So if you're limiting Kenny Britt, you're left with what? Brian Quick and Tavon Austin. The only thing that just for people listening, if I'm going to pay up, I am going to pay up for the Giants defense because one thing I noticed, if you look back at Josh McCown, when he's taken, I think it's over 35 or 40 attempts this year, his sack numbers are like 5 or 6 per game. And I know the Giants haven't been putting up sacks, but in a game that's trending towards that direction, you would assume he should be getting hit a lot in the backfield.
Well, the Giants have been getting a lot of sacks at home. It just seems like on the road they average like fewer than one per game. It's a really weird stat, but at home they're like over 3 per game. So it's just really
it's a game script. And again, this is only if you're paying up. I'm not going after them.
Yeah. All right. So we have the Saints now. So got 2 running back slots left, a wide receiver and a flex. So we can pay up at some options if we have some cheaper guys on board. So Joe, who do you want to take?
Well,
here?
let's just go with Devontae Parker to kind of give us some more options since we're already going a little bit contrarian.
All right, let's see. Parker. Yeah, he's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
All right. So Jake, 5,800 per player. So it's a solid bankroll left.
Yeah.
So you can pretty much go where you want here at running back. Unless you want to take the flex, you can throw a wide receiver in there if you want.
I really want to take Melvin Gordon.
I have no issue with that. I like Melvin Gordon.
That's good.
Do you want to go Gordon?
Yeah, I mean, I do if you guys are good with it.
Yeah, I'm totally good with that. That gives me a chance to put in Carlos Hyde.
It's like you were waiting for that.
I wanted to see if it worked out. If I had more money, I may have gone up to someone like Rashad Jennings. Yeah. I mean, it's really like for me, it's like I'm either down there at that range or I'm paying up. So I'm going to leave Joe quite a bit of money here for the flex.
What do we have left?
5,600.
You get Eifert, Jennings, Pryor, Booker, Shepard, Latavius, Forte.
Yeah, let's go Rashad Jennings.
This is a good range. This is a really good range.
Jennings over Shepard?
Yeah, I think I like Jennings. I think he's just probably has a little bit more upside, I think, than Shepard. I think Shepard's going to be pretty highly owned, but I guess Jennings might be too. But I think I'd rather go with Jennings. With
the floor. I love this lineup, actually. It's very rare because we always get to that last player and we're always like going back and forth. But like I'm legit like excited about this lineup. Devontae Parker is the one I worry about, but at the same time, if Carlos Hyde is almost like a correlation. If Carlos Hyde is carrying the ball, getting his work like I expect him to, then Devontae Parker, as you guys mentioned, against outside cornerbacks, specifically on Parker's side, they're struggling. 4,700. I have no issue with it. So I actually like this lineup an awful lot. So
there's somebody we didn't talk about that. Another Matthews, Rashard Matthews, that I still love to death.
I worry about it. I just think that game script is a real concern in that. I just feel like that it's going to be back to one of those games where he's going to have to be ultra efficient. Like he's going to see probably 5 targets. I can't project him for anything more than 7. And against the
double
Bears,
digit in 2 of the last 3 games though.
Yeah. Right, but they've also played against the Packers and the Colts, teams who put up points. Like this game, they are not going to have to throw the ball. Like that's my concern with Rashard Matthews.
I understand. The only reason I thought of it is because if you slop in, I'm just making it. If you slide in the Texans defense, you actually get to Rashard Matthews, Lamar Miller, Greg Olsen, Todd Gurley, Thomas Rawls level. That's kind of appealing.
It kind of is.
That's for Joe because that gives you other options, Joe. I don't know if you like Rashad Jennings, or I kind of like some of those options better than Rashad Jennings.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think Matt Forte is an interesting one too at 5,500 against the Patriots.
He's kind of in that weird range too.
Pass catching. That's if you want to talk about game script and down that. I think this is going to be a Bilal Powell game.
Well, that's the thing is Forte's been out there for snaps and like he's been getting all the carries and 100%. Bilal Powell's been getting the receptions, but this is a game where I think both of them should be able to do work in the passing game because they're not going to be in this game.
Well, they're going to take Brandon Marshall out of the game probably, right? When we assume that that's going to be Belichick's plan to just take him out and someone else. That's why I like Forte a lot. I think is for that reason.
No, he's going to take that Quincy Enunwa.
Well, actually, that's where they struggle the most. The Patriots against slot wide receivers, they've been dominated all year by them. So,
you guys like the Patriots defense at all? I feel like they're always in a really good spot on paper, and then they just have 6 points.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes. And like this could be a game where it's just like a bunch of garbage time points for the Jets. Like honestly, the weirdest, oddest calls is that Ryan Fitzpatrick is like 5,100, right? And like I don't know. They're coming out of a bye week. They're at home. It's a division game. They know who the Patriots are. Like, I don't know. I think there's worse things that you could do. But I do like this team. So for you guys, like, if you guys can keep track at home, the quarterback, we have a Derek Carr. Running back, we have Melvin Gordon and Carlos Hyde. Wide receivers, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, Devontae Parker. Tight end, Martellus Bennett. Flex, Rashad Jennings. And defense, we have the Saints. And as we've been talking about, you could swap out Rashad Jennings for somebody if you want. You could swap out the Saints defense, go down to, Jake was saying, Houston, and then upgrade. There's a lot of interesting options this week, but I feel like this lineup it's interesting enough. Like, there's some chalk plays in it, but there's also some guys that, like, Martellus Bennett's not going to be heavily owned. I don't think Carlos Hyde's going to be heavily owned. So I think that differentiates our lineup like just enough, because around 4,800, a lot of people might play somebody like Doug Martin over Carlos Hyde. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The Saints defense.
I like it. I like that kind of our value plays are ones that we know are going to get volume too, and I think that's a really good thing to do. As far as if you're going to play with the value and the chalk, at least make sure you're getting that value or you're getting that volume at a cheap rate.
Yeah, no, I like it. I'm curious to see how it goes. Somebody throw this thing in a tournament. Let me know how it does, because being in Arizona, I can't play. Good times, right? Guys, do you have any parting thoughts before we get out of here for the day?
What are you doing for your birthday now, Jake? How old are you, Jake? We can get that on record now that we've been talking about it. It's just a mystery.
It's going to remain a mystery. I'm not officially anything older anyway until Tuesday, officially.
So, yeah, Jake won't tell us his age. He tells me that he's older than me. So apparently I can't give him too much crap. I said that.
Bartolo Colon. I'll put it that way.
I think we're all younger than Bartolo Colon.
But
guys,
not as magnificent, ever.
Oh man, if you guys enjoyed the show, let us know. Hit us up on Twitter, share it on Twitter, do us a favor. And I'm going to have this up in podcast version if you missed portions of it or whatever. I'm going to have that up within the hour. And you guys can ask, if you have any questions basically from what we talked about today, hit us up on Twitter. Jake is at AllInKid. Joe is at Joe Holka. Myself at Mike Tagliere NFL. We will be back here at our normal time next week on Friday. Like I said, this week was just an interesting one for us with everything kind of going on. So we appreciate you guys coming out. Again, go visit rototracker.com/POR and get yourself a free membership there. And if you ever upgrade, you get 10% off. Thank you as always for listening. And until next time, guys, lights out.